Sagon, Scanagoa, the piece is great. Dr. Joseph Martin here, Donegalanqua, with a White Eagle Feather for Canada Day here, July 1st, 2014. In Canadian terms, that would be the English terms of Confederation since 1867, this is now our 147th Canada Day or birthday. However, we need to point out this is Canada Day, past, present, and future, this topic of this YouTube. That as an anthropologist and archaeologist working through the University of Toronto when I was there in the 70s and 80s, we know that the First Nations peoples have been here on Turtle Island, just in Kanatakan, which is an Algonquian word meaning Canada. So yes, even the name of our country is a First Nations name, word, meaning. That there have been hundreds of thousands of First Nations peoples here primordially before contact, or before invasion, as some of us like to say, in 1492 by the English and the French. And at that time, of the hundreds of thousands of First Nations here in all of the territory, coast to coast to coast, there were well over 600 different languages or language affiliations and cultures and tribal and band groupings all over this great continent and country above the 49th parallel for the most part. Now, of all those over 600 languages and cultures, how many are left and how many will exist to the end of the 21st century? It may be the fact that so many have been killed or died out through all the means of divide and conquer that there may only be now 4 that will be allowed to be spoken. That is, you need at least anywhere from 2,000 to 5,000 people to keep a language strong and going forward in time. What are those 4 languages? Oski or Cree, including some Northern Cree and some Plains Cree, some variants. Anishinaabe or Ojibwe. Mohawk, perhaps one of the only of the 6 nations, perhaps Seneca language. The Haudenosaunee, the 6 Nations of the Iroquois, and probably the Dene language and variants of the Dene language in the Northwest Territories, and perhaps as a 5th one, Inuktitut of the Innu people up in the northern part of Canada, in Nunavut. So that's a huge demolition of language, culture, identity, peoples, destroying of complete ways of life, worldviews that are completely complementary or opposite in many ways to the Western hegemony of intellectualism, logic, materialism, scientism, and greed and selfishness and raping and pillaging, not only of the culture and the languages, but of the earth herself, our Mother Earth, Dendrea, the white buffalo calf woman. Now, therefore, that's just a bit of the history of the past of Canada. We know that the other European cultures that came here that were part of the capitalistic industrial age of taking over other countries and colonization of the minds and the values and the beliefs of the people and running roughshod over their own rights and determinations are the French and the English. And since that time in the 1500s and 1600s, where there was all the religious churches and other organizations, social institutions that denied the rights of the First Nations peoples. We know through the Truth and Reconciliation program that's been going on for the last 20 years, notwithstanding the fact that the Prime Minister of Canada a few years back apologized for all the degradation and destruction and actually the murder of many of the people, not just the language, actual murder of them, through the churches and through the government, schools, and programs. Very paternalistic. Since the that kind of 400, 500-year period, and of course it took about 150 years to move all across Canada to let's say British Columbia, where I live now. Obviously, through immigration during the 20th century, before the First War, and after the First War, and during the Second War, and after the Second War, and so on, there are now over 300 different ethnic groups, language groups, religious groups, nationalities here who've immigrated into Canada. Well over 300. In fact, one might say that almost all the nations of the world, uh, past and present, are represented here in our multicultural society we now call Canada. And I do want to be very positive about this. This is a unique society that is based on the Haudenosaunee or the Mohawk values of peace, righteousness, good government, harmony and balance, peacekeeping, and sharing with others around the planet. That's been very much part of our worldview, our values, and our beliefs in Canada, well, at least up until around 2000. Now it seems to be changing, and we seem to be losing those values and that worldview of peacekeepers and being a righteous nation and people. Nevertheless, along with the Kiwis of the world and perhaps the Aussies, we are considered to be one of the greatest nations on the planet and the people who are most loved and liked by other nationalities when we go and travel. That may be the reason why so many people want to immigrate and live in Canada, including Asians from China, from the Philippines, and from the Far East and so on. Many people are coming here, and perhaps one of the reasons, the main reasons, because it's not just the materialism or the good lifestyle, it's in fact more than that. They feel that there won't be any racism or prejudice or judgment or destruction or killing or murder of them and their families, whether it's out and out military control and totalitarian fascist regimes, or whether in fact it's just the fact that many of the countries are polluted with polluted consciousness, polluted air, polluted water, polluted food that are killing the people, as it is in China today. So it's a call to basic higher consciousness for all of us who are here in Canada today to do a number of things. Whether you're an immigrant from Russia or the Ukraine or China or Philippines or New Zealand or any of the African nations or the Central or South American nations, indigenous, non-indigenous, I would say to you, this is a chance to have one unique country in the world where we can show the rest of the world how we can live without racism, prejudice, selfishness, and greed, and actually move forward, going forward into the rest of the 21st century with a lot of sense of peacefulness, justice, sharing, listening, trying to understand other cultures, religions, languages, nationalities, supporting them, helping immigrants, give them a foot up, helping the Aboriginal people with self-determination and self-justice, giving them a higher education, and in fact, not just a higher education for all of the First Nations who so deeply need and request this, but all of the new immigrants, including all of those who are English and French. Well, how does it look for the rest of the 21st century? We're barely into the second decade here. Now, and notwithstanding the fact that there may be lots of turmoil going on, as there always is in the world, and little wars and little battles here, there's over 200 of them right on the planet right now. At this moment, none of them really going on within the boundary of Canada. There is a whole challenge of regionalism and whether Canada going forward in 20, 40, 50, 100, 200, 500 years will still exist as a nation. And we can ask the same question anthropologically about many of the other nations of the world. There's so much ethnic strife, for instance, just say in Iraq, that it may divide into 4 different ethnic groups. Will Canada still survive through the 21st century? This is the question of this YouTube video. We have 7 regional groups that have so far supported one another through a federal government, but it may be the fact that some, or maybe even all, or many, may actually separate at some point. We knew that the French issue with separation has been a huge political, social, cultural issue, and they're always voting on it for referendums in Quebec. I myself am a Quebecer. I love the French culture. I do speak French. I am fully bilingual, and I have lived in Quebec in many different places and times in my life. And I, for one, would like to see Quebec moving forward and staying within the Confederation. Confederation itself is a social organizational political principle that was brought by Daganoweda, our Mohawk peacemaker, and it's all based the Canadian Constitution as well as the American Constitution and the United Nations Constitution was founded and borrowed from the Haudenosaunee Confederacy of the Six Nations. Good point to remember. So going forward, hopefully all the people in Quebec will feel a united consciousness of wanting to co-participate and co-create a better future for all of our peoples. You know, there's a wealth and a richness when there's a lot of sharing in terms of different languages, different identities, different ways of thinking, which come from language and culture and values and worldviews. So it would be great if all the Quebecers, I think perhaps the younger generation in Quebec is really moving forward with wanting to stay in the Confederation of Canada. So it would seem after the last recent Quebec provincial election. So what are the 7 regions? We have Atlantic Canada with Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, Newfoundland, and Labrador, and Prince Edward Island. Then we have Quebec. And then we have Ontario, which seems to be a place unto its own, a place I'm very familiar with because I was born and lived all over the province in Ontario. Then we have, fourthly, we have the Prairie Provinces, which would be strictly Manitoba and Saskatchewan. And then next we would have Alberta unto itself because it is a very unique culture. And then British Columbia because of the mountains and being a Pacific coastal place that we have a strong connection with the Pacific Rim. And 6th and 7th would be the Northwest Territories, where the Dene people live, and Nunavut, where the Innu people live, who speak Inuktitut. Will these 7 regions of Canada stay together over time to come? That's a good question. I would highly recommend that you and your colleagues, your families, your children, your parents, your communities, your cadre, your people that you work with, and your communities where you live, get together and discuss this on Canada Day and every day of the year. It's important because, you know, there seems to be, just on a political level, federally speaking, a takeover of moving away from the consideration of enhancing and building the cultural values of Canadians and our Canadian multilingual unified conscious culture and our worldview and who we want to be, how we want to be, our identity, how we want to be with one another, how we want to be seen and experienced by other nations. It seems to be that that's not even in the radar of the present political government, federally speaking. In fact, what we have as a takeover, the corporatization of the federal government and its policies, as seen by all the bills that are passed, and including particularly the budgets that are passed, are all meant to, in a hidden way, although they're all there in black and white, show the collective corporatization of it, the giveaway of our lands and our resources to other nations, and particularly to China, which is buying up our lands and our resources, potash, oil, gas, mining, and so on, gold, silver, diamonds, uranium, and so on. This giveaway, this outright blatant giveaway by the federal government, in a way could be destroying our government, and has been going on through the 1980s, 90s, and into the early part of this century. So it's been going on for at least 35 years. Whether we can turn this around is a notion and a motion for higher basic call to consciousness of ourselves as individuals, families, communities of the Canadian people to recalibrate and regenerate the kind of people we want to be and our Canadian culture. I want to just close with two comments about nations and going forward. One, of course, is from the ancient Greek democratic philosopher Plato, and this is what Plato had to say. One of the penalties for refusing to participate in politics is that you end up being governed by your inferiors. And another one by Niccolo Machiavelli, politics have no relation to morals. I want to make this a celebration. There's so much to celebrate coast to coast to coast. We are moving forward. Most of the Canadians said we have this feeling and experience of being very kind, very gentle, very patient and obedient and sharing and self-unassuming and so on. And those are qualities that show our vulnerabilities, which are our greatest strengths. Our greatest strengths are abilities to listen, to involve ourselves, to reflect, to share, to laugh, to enjoy. And moving forward, I would say to people of all generations, colors, religions, ethnicities, and certainly sexual orientations. And isn't it a great thing that this is Pride Week and a World Pride Week in Toronto as we speak, that people of all backgrounds, colors, and sexual orientations can legally get married here in our great country of Canada. Well, all love and blessings to you from Dr. Joseph Martin, Donna Galenqua. Happy Canada Day to all Canadians. To those of you who are in other countries, I wish you happiness in your nation, and come and visit us here in Canada. We look forward to seeing you, and maybe some of you will immigrate and move here. And what a joy that would be to have you here co-creating our new future in Canada. All love and blessings, Dr. Joseph Martin.